Hey, what's going on, guys? It's ETAPRIME back here again. Today we're going to be taking a look at this brand new 16.1-inch Victus Gaming Laptop from HP. This is their new line of gaming notebooks, and I've been really wanting to get my hands on one. They do make a ton of variants of this laptop, but this one here can be had for around $800 from Best Buy or HP's website. This has 16 gigabytes of RAM, the new i5-11400H, and a GTX 3050 GPU. They also make higher-end Intel i7 variants and Ryzen variants, and as for the GPU, you can get up to an RTX 3060, but I wanted to go as budget as possible with the new Victus, so I chose one of the base models with that i5-11400H and the 3050 non-TI variant. So yeah, I'm super excited about testing this out. In this video, we're going to be running some benchmarks, testing out some PC gaming, and some emulation. When it comes to the keyboard, I'm actually a big fan of this. We do have our number pad over to the right-hand side. It's not the best keyboard that I've ever messed around with on a laptop, but it'll definitely get you by, and for the price, I think it's actually really good. It is backlit, but it's not RGB. We have a single white zone, and the trackpad here feels really good. We got plenty of size here, given that this laptop does have a bigger footprint than a 15.6-inch variant, because this is a 16.1-inch screen on the Victus. When it comes to pricing on this specific Victus laptop that I have here, I've seen them anywhere from $799 up to $899, and it really depends on where you get them and if there's a sale going on. But when it comes to the specs for that CPU, we have the i5-11400H, 6 cores, 12 threads, base clock of 2.7 with a max turbo up to 4.5. An RTX 3050 non-TI variant with 4 GB of GDDR6, 16 GB of DDR4 running at 3200 MHz, a 16.1-inch IPS 1080p 60Hz display, and when it comes to storage, they really do cheap out on these budget models. We only have a 256 GB NVMe SSD, at least for this one here with the price I paid. But it's actually really easy to upgrade this, and I was actually surprised to see this. Once I pulled the bottom off, I noticed that we had a free NVMe SSD slot, so if you want to throw a 1TB or a 2TB drive in here, very easy to do. So we have our main drive over on the left hand side and the free slot over here, which does come with a little heatsink. It's got this copper heatsink you just need to pull off, but we can easily upgrade the storage on this. And as you can see, it does come with dual channel RAM. This can be upgraded to 64 GB. When it comes to the cooling system, it definitely looks sufficient for the configuration I have here. I would be a little worried about this if this was the RTX 3060 model with the i7 or something a little higher end, but with that 11400H and that 3050 Ti, I do think the temps on this are actually going to be really good. So now I want to move over to a little bit of gaming, then we'll get into Windows, we'll run some benchmarks, test some more PC games, and then move right over to some emulation. Then I'll give you my final thoughts. But first up, we have Dirt 5 here, 1080p with a mix of very high and high settings. I got an average of 71 FPS out of this game, and usually, since we only have that 60Hz display, I would go ahead and lock this down. I think there's a chance that at very high settings, we could just lock this at 60 and play it all day long. But either way you look at it, Dirt 5 is a demanding game, especially at those higher settings, and this RTX 3050 paired with the 11400H can definitely handle it. Alright, so this has been up and running for a little while. I've gone through some benchmarks, tested out some games. First and foremost, there's a little bit of bloat installed here, like all new laptops. I mean, basically everything that I've tested this year has some bloat installed. If we head over here, you can see that Booking.com was installed on this. We have all of the HP apps, McAfee, and we also have the Omen Gaming Center, the Omen Gaming Hub. And this actually does come in really handy. We have our system vitals here, undervolting. We can set this to intelligent or custom, that way we can get a little better battery life out of it and temps. Network booster, I don't usually use this. And our performance control, quiet, default, performance, and we can set it up so the fan speed is at max. But through all of the testing you're going to see in this video, I'm set to performance, fan is going to be on auto. And a lot of this bloat can be uninstalled without any issues. Now the first thing I always like to do with these laptops is run some benchmarks, so let's go ahead and see how this thing performs. When it comes to Geekbench 5, single core came in with a 1470, multi 7205. With Cinebench R23, we got a total multi-core score of 8465, and if you take a look at the one right above that, that's the Ryzen 7 1700X, 8 cores, 16 threads, and we're right there with it. With a bit of tweaking to this 11400H, I think we can match that or maybe exceed it. Moving over to some GPU benchmarks, first up we have Night Raid with a total score of 37,678. Firestrike came in with an 11,949. And finally, Time Spy with a 5,290. I'm actually really impressed with all of the benchmarks I ran in this video given the price of this laptop. But those are benchmarks. Now it's time to see how this thing really handles gaming. First up, we have The Witcher 3 1080p with a mix of ultra and high settings. I was really hoping that I could get all ultra out of it, but I did have to drop some of this down to high. By the end of this run here, I had an average of 67 FPS.
Slow now, whoa.
GTA 5 did really well with this setup. 1080p, very high settings. We got an average of 94 FPS by the end of my run. It's looking really good here, especially with those very high settings. I actually thought the Doom Eternal would do a little better than it did, but here it is, 1080p ultra settings. By the end of this here, with a lot of stuff going on, we had an average of 66 FPS. Forza Horizon 4 is one of my favorite racing games, so here it is, 1080p, ultra settings. We got an average of 71 FPS, and it's actually looking pretty good. Personally, I would probably just drop this down to very high settings. It still looks great there, but I still wanted to see what it did at ultra. And finally, for the PC gaming side of things, we have Cyberpunk 2077. This actually super exceeded what I thought it would do. 1080p DLSS set to performance, we actually got an average of 82 FPS out of this one. Moving over to some emulation using CEMU for WiiU. Here's Breath of the Wild, 1080p, Vulkan backend, async shaders. This is at 60 FPS, and keep in mind, this is at 1080p. It'll run it all day long like this. Really great performance, and you know, going into this, I kind of expected it to be with that 6-core, 12-thread CPU and that RTX 3050. Moving up a bit, something a little harder to run, we have PS3 using RPCS3. I like testing Skate 3 because this is kind of one of those games that, you know, either works or it doesn't on your system. We are upscaled to 1080p with that Vulkan backend, and it's running phenomenally. And finally here, Xenia for some Xbox 360 emulation. We have Red Dead Redemption, and unfortunately Forza 2 kept crashing on me. That's the one I always like to test, but this one here is actually running pretty decently. I couldn't get it to go to 60 on this system here. It was around 54, but turning that VSync on and locking it at 30 works really, really well. When it comes to CPU temps, the built-in cooling system can definitely handle this i5-11400H. Idle, 34 degrees Celsius, average gaming, 75, and in a 10-minute Cinebench R23 test, we only reached 88 degrees Celsius, and that's with all 6 cores and 12 threads maxed out. So in the end, I think the Victus actually performed really well given its price point. Now, like I mentioned at the beginning, I wanted to get one of the lower end models. I did opt for 16 gigabytes of RAM instead of 8 because that would really hold us back with 8. But I do think this i5-11400H paired up with that RTX 3050 is a pretty decent 1080p combo. You can tell that the panel in here is a budget panel. I do wish it would get a bit brighter, but I mean, for the price, I really can't complain here. And if you did want to spend a little more money, they do offer a better panel at 144 Hz, but that will set you back a few more dollars. And like I mentioned, I wanted to keep this as budget as possible. And with that 3050, I think a 60 Hz panel is perfectly fine. The speakers aren't anything to write home about, but they definitely put out enough sound. They got a little bit of bass to them, and they're not too tinny. I've heard way worse in budget laptops in the past. So yeah, if you're in the market for a budget 1080p gaming laptop, then I would definitely take a look at the Victus. I mean, there's lots of options on the market. This is a newer one, and I'm sure in the future we're going to see higher quality Victus laptops with better specs come out. So if you want to wait for Gen 2 or go with a different manufacturer, that's totally up to you, but I really wanted to get my hands on one, and you saw how it performed with 1080p gaming in this video. I think it's a pretty decent deal for what's going on right now in the world with PC part availability and GPU prices right now. So, you know, picking up a gaming laptop might be the best option. But that's going to wrap it up for this video. Really appreciate you watching. If you're interested in learning more about this, I will leave a couple links in the description. If there's anything else you want to see running on this, or if you have any questions, let me know in the comments below. And like always, thanks for watching.